Welcome to From the Trenches, success shortcuts revealed by real-world innovators crushing it right now. I'm your host, Scott Hartley, and we're back with another episode packed with actionable strategies from today's most successful entrepreneurs. If you're tired of generic business advice and ready for real cutting-edge tactics that are working right now, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving deep into the human-to-human aspect of sales. And I can't wait for my guest to share with you his transformational insights. So let me introduce you to Steve DeBree. Steve has been in training and development since 1987. He's worked as an independent organizational performance consultant since 1991. And his focus is on transforming potential into performance in sales, service, and coaching. He utilizes the latest in assessment science to enhance effectiveness for individuals, teams, and organizations as a whole, using these instruments to truly leverage the science of behavior to tap into the hidden potential in all organizations. Steve, I'm so excited to have you on the call today.
Scott, well, thanks so much for inviting me to be part of our podcast today. Really excited. I love the introduction. My God, that was well done.
Awesome. Well, thank you. No, I'm excited to have you on here. So, just as kind of a background for all of our podcast listeners, Steve and I are in a mastermind group, Titans Mastermind, put together by Brian Kurtz. And then every Monday, we are also in an accountability group call. And so, Steve is always sharing his insights and expertise in the area of sales. And I know that, a lot of my clients that I've had conversations with and a lot of other people that I've talked to, sales is kind of one of those things that nobody really likes, right? It's, it kind of has that negative connotation of, oh, I don't want to be the car salesman type. I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to, we just kind of have this aversion to it. But, with the way that you approach sales is that it takes all of that ickiness and everything out of it. And it's truly something that we all need to be doing, obviously for our businesses to thrive, right? But it doesn't have to be that icky thing that so many of us think of. So, but before we kind of dive into that, and I know that you've kind of got two particular, components that you think of when it comes to sales. Just kind of love to hear kind of like your backstory. Like, how did you get into the sales and the sales training and the sales performance field?
Well, it's an interesting story. I mean, I was actually an athlete in college way back, played two different sports, and I wanted to be a professional athlete, and I didn't let go of that for a long time.
Uh-huh.
I actually got drafted into the North American Soccer League as a goalkeeper, fourth round draft choice near the end. I wasn't Mr. Irrelevant, but I was close. And after the Minnesota Kicks decided that they could live without me, I had to get out in the real world and get a job. Now, I was an economics major, and you got to picture this right in the early 80s. Interest rates, the prime rate was around 17 and a half, 18%. And
Mhm.
nobody wanted to add to the expense line. So the only jobs available in at that point, after I had given up on the career in soccer, was in sales. So I got into sales by default, not by intention. And and I remember being in sales and struggling and not really knowing what I was doing and trying to go out and I find that some people would buy from me who liked me, some people liked me but didn't buy from me, and some people I didn't know if they liked me or not bought from me, and then some people I didn't know uh, didn't buy from me. Because I was very relationship focused. So I was like,
Mhm.
well, what is this? And I remember taking the first sales training course I took in 1985 and finally seeing that there was a process and flow. So I really was wandering around in this career for a number of years getting started. And, I went through all the rah, and eventually I got trained to deliver that sales training methodology and also public speaking program that I was part of. And I changed careers into professional development. And I worked with them for about 4 years. And I could see that, a lot of people struggled with this.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it was the very training methodology that would define selling in a certain way as good salespeople could get people to do. So it was very, if you will, uh, I don't want to use the word necessarily manipulative that we had, but it was sort of kind of coercive to get
Mhm.
people to take actions. And oftentimes there was a values conflict. And I remember actually training the program, and people would ask me, there was something I really didn't feel good about myself. And they say, well, how do you ask that? And I said, well, I really don't do that. So I felt a little bit in conflict because here I was when push came to shove, certain aspects of what was being in the training room that I didn't feel comfortable doing because I sort of fit the stereotype of, that's that type of salesperson. So
Yeah.
in 1991, I got the opportunity to experience a different type of training methodology. It was called integrity selling. Ron
Hmm.
Willingham was the author. I had an opportunity to become an independent consultant, have my own business, and go out and spread this methodology, which is very values focused, client needs focused. And for me, there was a rightness about it. I mean, I saw in the first hour and a half when Ron was presenting this, I had been married 2 months. I called my wife and I said, I think I found something I could pour my heart into.
Hmm.
And of course, this was in Phoenix, and I was calling back to Maine. I live up here in Portland, Maine, and of course she said, "You haven't signed any legally binding contracts yet, have you?" And I said, "No, no." But when we came back, we had a 30-minute conversation, and I changed and I shifted and started my own business. Now, newlywed, I'm a new stepdad in the midst of a recession in '91. I remember my wife's sisters asking, "Who is this guy? How long have you known him?" But I'd like to say the two best decisions I ever made, marrying my bride and becoming affiliated in presenting this methodology.
Yeah.
So that's been my path.
Wow.
And that's what I've been doing for the last
Interesting.
33
Yeah.
years now.
33 years. It's amazing how time flies when you're doing something that you love and that you're passionate about, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I know just from our accountability calls, when you're sharing, your wisdom, with us and, kind of coaching us, that are in that group, about, different sales environments that we're in and working with our clients, I can tell that you're really passionate about this and that this is something that, that really, comes from your heart, wanting to help people really master this. And like you said, it's integrity selling. So it's not, hey, I've got to go out and make sales today, no matter what. Like, I've got to strong arm somebody into buying something from me. It's really, coming from a sense of purpose and, care, for that other person. So, before we started, recording here today, you mentioned that there's two aspect of sales that we kind of
Yeah.
have to master, right? So I'd like for you to kind of like dive into that just a little bit and tell us, what those two are and why they're important.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yes, Scott. Two aspects that really come to mind for us that we think about in terms of sales performance are number one, mindset. What is the mindset you have about sales in the integrity process? That was one of the things that caught me right off was Ron Willingham, our founder, spoke to that. Now, Ron had worked from a number of years in his career with Dr. Maxwell Maltz, who wrote the great personal development book, Psycho-Cybernetics.
Hmm.
And actually, Ron helped, now I'm really dating it now. He helped Maxwell Maltz put that, it became one of the first self-development programs put on audio cassette. Now, I know some of our listeners will say, what's an audio cassette?
Right.
Google it, but he helped him do that. So that was at that mindset piece has been at the heart of everything we do. So we
Hmm.
think about the mindset around selling, and you alluded to it just a moment ago, but also the skill set. Okay, now what are the skills, by the way? Is what's the process that helps to reinforce, if you will, a more positive view of what I do in my role as a salesperson?
Hmm.
So that's really what we take a look at: mindset, skill set, and a lot of times, we'll be called in because we got to sharpen sales skills in this organization or with my team, whatever. But at the heart of it really is that there's a mindset issue, that people are in conflict as they're going out making their sales calls, engaging with people, or like you help organizations generate leads so that you've got qualified prospects to talk to. That people those conversations are compromised in their effectiveness because of people's inner conflict about how they're guiding somebody through the process.
Hmm.
So that is key. So I like to say that mindset trumps skill set. Now,
Yeah.
skill set's necessary, but not sufficient. I
Right.
need to have the right mindset in order to really excel and be at high levels of performance.
Yeah, I mean, you can teach somebody the skills and the tactics and the strategies, till you're blue in the face and, they could perfect those. But I know that, just even in my own life in different areas, not just in sales, I mean, that's one aspect of it. But if your mind isn't right, like you're not going to be as effective. You're not going to get the results that you're looking for, just because you can go through the motions and actually, do what needs to be done, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And it really starts, and there are five sets of beliefs that we feel are critical. And I remember when Ron Willingham, our founder, put this on the flip chart. This is the thing, a flip chart, by the way, not a PowerPoint in 1991. And Ron put it up there, and he was giving me language from my experience because of the inner conflicts that I had gone through, the things that had got in the way of me being as effective as I could be in a role. And the first one, there are five, and are there more? Yes, but these are five that we can feel accord. Number one, my view of what I think that role of selling really means. So, what's my internal definition of selling?
Mm.
Do I see it as a proactive process to understand people's needs, engage in really thoroughly understanding those needs, and then, if appropriate, presenting solutions that will help people and assist them? Or do I see it as the process of pushing a product and hammering away at people until they finally relent and give in and say yes?
Mm.
One, I mean, how do I view that? Now, those are two opposite extremes, but where am I? Okay,
Hmm.
now what have I been trained? You think about how the stereotypes of, like you said, the used car salesperson, and I've met used car salespeople that are very customer focused,
Yeah.
but the traditional experience isn't that way.
Right.
So how do I view that? So how do I define it? So one of the things that we do is say, hey, if we're going to talk about selling, let's define it up front. What is it? And
Hmm.
typically when we present our definition, and I shared it with you, a proactive process, people say, well, I like that. But you've got all of you think about some of the movies that reinforce a very negative stereotype. One of the ones I remember, like Boiler Room, Wolf of Wall Street,
Hmm.
uh, well, what else? Tin Man, I'm going way back with Danny DeVito. And oh, Glenn Ross, it always comes up. So very, coffee is for closers, those types of things.
Yep.
We try to unplug that. The next definition, the next personal belief I need to have is what's my view of my own personal abilities to do what I think selling is?
Hmm.
Am I confident around being able to execute it? Now, if it's about being pushy, a lot of times people say, I can't be that way. I couldn't do that. And then center of this are my values. So a lot of times there are conflicts between these beliefs. Well, this is what you're asking me to do. I don't believe I should treat people that way. And
Hmm.
so right away, I'm in conflict. And
Yeah.
then one of the other aspects then is my belief in what I'm selling and my belief in the value that's created. Do I believe that the value created by doing business with us is here versus what we charge? Are we just fairly priced or do we overcharge? That belief, a lot of times people say, well, I could never sell anything I don't believe in. Okay, I get that. And a lot of
Hmm.
times it's why? Because it conflicts with my values. I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me, and don't ask me to do that to someone else.
Yeah.
So that can be a way. And then the last element that's critical is my personal commitment to execute the activities that are required. So do I have clear goals? Do I have a plan? And do I pursue those goals? So those are five. Now, when those are all aligned and there's no conflict, then it's the energy I have within me and that purpose and passion you talked about freely froze into my career. And people
Yeah.
are motivated, they're energized from within. It's not a sales manager motivating them, it's coming from within. Now, at the same time, if there's conflict, it's like looking through a telescope and having the lenses be out of focus. The image is blurred. So the energy from within gets caught up, if you will, like in the glass. So it's like
Hmm.
driving the car with the emergency brake on. The
Yeah.
energy is being drained off, and oftentimes people change careers, they change jobs, and what have you. So those are five sets of beliefs. One of the underpinning beliefs we have that comes from Dr. Maltz in our organization is people tend to perform consistent with the level of their inner beliefs.
Mm.
Now, are there other beliefs? But those are five core ones. So what we attempt to do, and this is really dependent on the organization, because what's the organization's definition of selling? Because we can present it in training, and then it's all about the number. It's all about the number. You're hitting the number and push it, and it's not about the mission. It's not about the value creating. Then
Hmm.
they're experiencing these conflicts. So when we align it, by the way, you have energized sales teams.
Yeah.
And then when you overlay then a sales skill set, which we have, which is all about understanding needs first. It's not about pressure, but it is about being appropriately assertive to the process.
Hmm.
That spends a lot of time listening and not, I talk limited amount in the sales process, only at the appropriate times. Then you've created an environment where people can be incredibly effective, and they say, you know what? Not only I like this definition of selling, I can do it, and it's the right way to treat people. The more they
Hmm.
do it, the more they see how it benefits their clients.
Yeah.
and then they're more motivated to go out and do the activities. So their effectiveness comes so much from mindset issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
does that
Well,
that make sense?
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, really kind of like honing in on those five areas is really key because, like you said, when you have that internal conflict, it makes it really difficult, to take action because it's like I just really can't do that. I know, like, with my IT business and really just everything that I've done in life, even in my current business, in working with people on email deliverability. Um, if I don't believe in what I'm selling, like I can't sell it to somebody. With my IT business, the easiest way for me to explain that was I refused to sell any consumer grade computers. And even though most of our client base were residential clients, I refused to sell any consumer grade laptops or desktops because they were made with inferior quality components that had a higher failure rate. They were loaded up with so much bloatware because that's how the manufacturers were able to keep the prices so low because all these companies were paying Dell and Lenovo and HP to put their software on the computers. But that slowed them down so much and created conflicts that it's like you're going to get this cheap computer, but you're going to spend more over the life of the computer. Whereas, like, if you invest in a high quality business class computer, that doesn't have all of that stuff, that's built with quality components, it's going to last you much longer and you're going to have a much better experience. So I just simply could not sell somebody a $300 laptop knowing all of this stuff. And, it was a decision that I had to make. And, a lot of clients thanked me for that because it saved them a lot of money. It saved them a lot of grief and heartache and frustration. And so I totally get, that. Whereas there's other people that are in the IT industry, like they could, they'll sell you, whatever that you want to buy,
Yeah.
they
Oh,
don't really have any
absolutely.
belief in that. But when it comes back to that mindset, what's I know there's a lot that goes into that, but what's maybe like an exercise that somebody can do to kind of help work through maybe some conflicts or some challenges that they're experiencing with that?
Well, too, yeah, that's a deep dive question. There was a couple more things I want to mention on mindset, and then we'll get back to your question if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
The one of the factors that goes in now, where those five are really important, and often we can bump up the activity level, and people feel better in the role, and you'll see performance go up. But one of the things that happens oftentimes is when you take the mindset issue and you go a deeper dive. One of the processes that I got exposed to years ago, also integrity selling, is sort of the sales training component. It's foundational. It's like a prerequisite of working with folks because that gets the skill set. But then one of the things that gets in the way is people's hesitation and emotional discomfort about what we call self-promotion. Now, I know that
Mm.
that term can have some negative connotations. They think about people being, almost annoying and I'm looking for the right word. I
They're
can't.
kind of a braggart, they're
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
out,
yeah,
tooting their own horn, like look at me, look at what I can do
yeah.
or have accomplished.
Absolutely braggadocious or whatever.
Yeah.
But what we really define it as is just simply making your competence visible.
Mm.
And one of the things I got exposed to years ago is a process called the psychology of sales call reluctance,
Hmm.
and an assessment that's been used for over 40 years. It's called the SPQ Gold. And what it does, it measures now, if you were to take sort of congruence model that I mentioned, those five beliefs, and you think about commitment to activities, here's one of the things. I show up with sales skills and I have motivation flowing towards goals. So two critical elements in sales performance is how motivated am I and how clearly focused are the activity goals that I have. The assumption is that energy flows right to motivation, flows right to the goals.
Hmm.
Here's what we find though, and everybody sort of has it to a different degree, is a level of fear about making that competence visible. And that is called call reluctance. And that is the emotional short circuit in a motivated, goal directed salesperson. So that takes the form, and there are 15 different mindsets that get into it. We
Hmm.
already talked about one, my view of selling. We call that role rejection, that I don't like being in sales and there's emotional discomfort to it, that I've got self talk going on That's about somewhere along the line. I learned I should have been a doctor, lawyer, whatever, something else. Sales is, in my opinion, a step down.
Mm-hmm.
So there's unexpressed, unresolved guilt or shame. Now, that's one aspect. Now, if I'm going to be in sales, and that's how I feel about the role, and that can be deep seated,
Yeah.
that's going to get in my way and it's going to short circuit the energy. Another one is number one form that people run into is yielder. And that is the unrelenting mental need to be liked by everybody always. So
Mm.
what happens is I don't want to be in any way perceived as pushy, intrusive, assertive, or whatever. So I will step back. So even if I'm in a sales conversation, I will not ask questions to dive deeper into issues that are important. I will leave a conversation without next steps because I don't want to be perceived as pushy.
Hmm.
So there are a whole set of mindset issues that even if I have the skills, will compromise that are a deeper dive than just the skills training that I do in integrity selling. And you start to think about it, it's really clearly been documented that people with higher, better scores, low call reluctance scores, but higher motivation and goal focus perform at a higher level. Now, they don't have to be out of the park, but the thing is, a motivated, if you have high and call reluctance scores, that will be an emotional discomfort and it'll compromise your effectiveness in sales. You won't make enough contacts. Let's say that you help an organization generate leads. They folks won't follow up on them. We talked about this. Is there follow up to it? Well,
Yeah.
a lot of times I don't want to follow up on them. I don't want to. It's not the right time. It's
Yeah.
not this. It's not this justification. And you know what? What they'll tell you makes perfect sense to them. And that's
Yeah.
simply the self talk and the rationalization. That's
And I'm just going to interject, like, this podcast session is getting a little uncomfortable because you're hitting really close to home for me because, like what you just described, is me, and I just want to, interject this in because I think that this is so important, and I've talked about it, in some of my emails that I do, my weekly emails that I send to clients, but I've noticed for me that this is an issue that stems from my childhood because I was rejected by my biological father when I was 8 years old. And you think, well, that has nothing to do with like business or sales, but it really does. Those childhood experiences and things like that, they can manifest themselves in so many other ways. And I found that over the past several years as I've kind of been working on that it shows up. It's like, oh, well, that kind of helps explain why I don't like to be pushy, why I want to be liked by everybody, and never be in a situation where somebody's going to say no, and
get it.
reject, me, even though it's not them actually rejecting me, but it's kind of that transference there. So
It feels like it. It
I think,
feels like it though.
yeah, it feels like it. And so I think it's really important, for our listeners to understand that, we really do have to, like, the mindset piece of this is so critically important because it's not just in the selling, but it can manifest itself in so many areas of our business. And if we look back and it's like, why am I not succeeding the way
Mm.
that I feel like I should be? Why am I not at where I feel like I should be at in my business or in my life or whatever, scenario that is? We have to look, like, most all the time it goes back to something with our belief system, with our mindset, something like that. So I appreciate, you
Oh
bringing
yeah,
this up, that that this is very fundamental to sales.
absolutely. And what you mentioned, by the way, is of the call reluctance types, only one can be attributed to sort of a physiological issue, and that's what we call doomsayer. And that's the person who is consistently concerned about the worst case scenario coming up.
Mm.
That the data has shown that is linked to inner ear infections. As a matter of fact, I was doing a program in
Huh.
New Jersey for a stock brokerage firm a number of years ago, and there was a woman in there, and she had a high doomsayer score. And I mentioned that, and we took a break. She came back because I said, you know what, it's often, and sometimes you don't even aware of it. She called her mother, and her mother says, "Oh, you don't remember this, but when you were 2 years old, we had you in the hospital. You had such horrible ear infections that we had to put drains in your ear."
Oh,
And
wow.
and there's correlation between the two. Now,
Hmm.
but you make the other important point is that the other forms are learned. Now,
Hmm.
learned it in your childhood. we've data and research that shows that if there are certain call reluctance mindsets that are prevalent within an organization, you hire somebody that isn't dramatically influenced by it, doesn't have those predispositions,
Hmm.
they will learn them within a year from their colleagues, unless you're
Really?
careful.
Oh,
So you have
wow.
to be very careful who you let near your salespeople's minds. Now I took that very personally because here I am doing sales training. I took it so I knew my predispositions because they'll say, "Hey, Steve, they had a great time in sales training, but their calls have dropped off because maybe I've been quote unquote infected them." Guess what? I'm with you, Scott. Yielder is one of mine.
Hmm.
Okay, that was one. I was in another organization where I had HyperPro, which was that one I have released dramatically, and Yielder, by the way. You can get over these. You can
Oh,
address them
sure.
and
Yeah.
reduce them. And I had learned them. I had Yielder. I think it was sort of like I wanted to be like you, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
Nothing wrong with it. I would prefer, but this is you. It's like I need to be liked by everybody always. And we talk about now in sales, you build a relationship. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
We have salespeople out there that say, I have great relationships. Well, how much business do we? Well, we're not doing any business, but I got to what? We'll laugh at it now, but that's behind it.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So what's one idea to do this? Now, we have one of the ways to address the call reluctance issues. We have something called thought realignment. Thought realignment. And since these are patterns, these are unplugging that pattern. And there are three things to do. Number one, you got to be aware of fear is physical. So what are the situations that tend to be the triggers for you where that fear? Because a lot of times our avoidance, I want to be aware of what do I hesitate to do? What do I procrastinate, put off doing? Or what do I outright avoid doing? What are the activities? Okay. So I got to be aware of those. And what are the triggers? And often fear is physical. And I
Mhm.
find a way to cope with that. And the cope is by the avoidance or the hesitation or by I just don't do it at all. So the three things I want to do, three questions that we ask. Number one, where's the proof that this has to be a frightening prospecting experience? So we call it three clearing questions. Where's the proof this has to be frightening? Okay. All right. So most of the time people say, well, there's no proof. Okay. All right. Couldn't, and just make the call. Or they say, well, there's some proof. I've had problems in the past. Okay. Go to the second question. Second question is, does the prospecting situation require me to feel this way? Do I have to feel this way? Could another person come in, same situation, and would they be required to feel it? Or is this simply me?
Hmm.
Well, no, it doesn't require me to feel this way. Okay, you're free to make the call. Third one is if there's proof, yeah, I had a horrible call last time. This was terrible. Yes, the situation in my mind requires me to feel this way. Do I have to feel this anxiety and fear so strongly that it will keep me from interacting with this person, picking up the phone, whatever? That or could I increase the intensity of it, almost like a volume control, or could I turn it down a bit?
Hmm.
Now, if at that point I say, hey, yes, it's I'm I've answered yes to the first two questions, and I say, you know what, I can't I have no control over it, then guess what? I am a total victim to this, and I have given up this. Most of the time, people say, well, I can turn this down a little bit. And when they start to do that, now it doesn't work right off immediately. Thought realignment, because I've learned this mindset. Thought realignment takes a little while to work, so you got to stay with it. But you got to be aware of the triggers in the moment. So you got to be very, very conscious and aware and intentionally put yourself in the position. Be aware of your escape routes. Mine was coffee. You can see I got a big mug here. Oh, I'll go down and refill my coffee. When I worked in an office, I'd stop and talk to people along the way. Oh, I want to be sociable. And
Yeah.
then next thing you know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes goes by that I didn't have to make the call.
Yeah.
So these habits of avoidance get perfected, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah,
No,
and,
no, no.
and it is so prevalent. I mean, I just while you're talking, I'm thinking back of like, oh, those follow-ups that I needed to be doing, or those outreaches that I needed to make. It's like, oh, what did I do? Well, I decided to go write this email, or I browse social
Oh
media,
yeah.
or whatever distraction that it could possibly be. So,
Oh yeah. Now, I want to be clear. I didn't dream this up. I mean, this is a book by Ron Willingham, Integrity Selling from the 21st Century. Ron has passed away. Ron has been an incredible mentor in my life. And this is a dog-eared copy of what I use, The Psychology of Sales Call Reluctance. I don't know, that's blurry a little bit there, but by George Dudley and Shannon Goodson in the latest book that they have called Relentless. This is about this. I'm not the author of this. I'm the facilitator and implementer and consultant that helps organizations bring this in and help salespeople. You think about the impact that it has on people's lives when they understand the mental, if you will, the mental models that are getting in their way.
Yeah.
And then when you empower managers to better understand these elements of belief that can undermine talented people, I start to coach people, I start to manage people differently.
Hmm.
And it becomes incredibly rewarding to see how salespeople's lives are transformed. And when salespeople do better, that cascades throughout an organization.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
as sales increase, then guess what? The benefits flow to everybody in the organization.
Yeah. And I know a lot of my listeners, are probably those solopreneurs or the smaller businesses. So, you are the salesperson, for your
Oh,
business, right? You're also the person who's, delivering the services, but you're also that salesperson. And so, you kind of have to, fit all of this, and do all of this. And in order to be successful as a solopreneur, or if you've got a small team, but you're that lead salesperson, thinking through this mindset, type of thing, is really, really important. Now, I know that we're getting close to the end of our time here, but I want to just kind of dive quickly into kind of the skills portion. I mean,
sure.
obviously, there's lots of training and everything out there that people can access that can help you with the skills piece of sales, but it goes hand in hand with what you're talking about, integrity selling. That
Mm.
some of those trainings are like they're very coercive. They're strong arming people, which is not what you're teaching with that.
No, not at all. And we start when we go through our process, it's not rocket science. I mean, when you think about some of the communication principles that are at the heart of our framework for sales, I mean, Covey talks about one of his 7 habits is seek to understand before being understood. And that's at the heart of what and Ron Willingham's been doing this long before his book was written. But we have a simple framework we call 8 Inc. And it's simply a framework for an organized sales conversation. It is a framework and a flow to the conversation. Now, I am a guide in the process. Now, I'm not trying to lead, quote unquote, lead people through. Now, one of the things I learned, words matter. Words matter, and what I say, it's an outward projection of my beliefs. I'm guiding people through. Now, I'm going to put pressure, not on them, not on me, but I'll put pressure on the process. Because I have an unwavering belief that if someone will allow me to guide them through this framework, their interests will be best served. And what do I mean by that? Well, the approach step is where we connect as human beings. What you do now, that means different things to different people. Some are much more, let's get to the point. Others more social. Some are much more reserved and cautious. So I want to connect with people the way they want to be connected. Then the I in this acronym stands for the interview step, and that's where we ask questions to understand needs, wants, issues. It's not necessarily about finding the pain point. It's about understanding the gap between where they are and where they'd like to be and what's at stake for them. Now, if that evokes emotion from them, so be it, because it's that significant.
Mm-hmm.
But it speaks to my intent. I want to partner with them in helping them reach their goals and being very honest to get them to see what's at stake for them. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I'll ask some questions to get them to build a level of trust to do that. Now, once we understand what those concerns are, we then demonstrate a solution. That's the D in the 8 Inc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so approach, interview, D, and then we take a little poetic license. We take the I and we use, so it stands for the word validation. Well, I think when Ron designed this, to be perfectly honest, Aid Vinc made a whole lot more sense than Aid. Aid Inc. made more sense than Aid Vinc.
Yeah.
And that's where I validate, cause people to trust and believe me. And that's throughout the whole process. Now, it's placed where it is because it's difficult to negotiate and close. Now, negotiate we define as working through the problems that keep people from moving forward when they want to. It's not about 101 tricky ways to overcome objections. Overcome, that word in and of itself implies force or coercion.
Mm-hmm.
So our words matter. So it's about helping people to work through them. I'm going to work and partner with them to that. And then C is for close. And that's simply agreed upon next step in the process.
Yeah.
People go through that framework differently. Now, one of the things we stress in that framework too, I spend the most of my time in the interview step. And the time split, I do 80% of the listening and only 20% of the talking through the first 2 steps of the process. Even when I'm demonstrating, I want to make sure it's interactive. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole framework to that. That's part of that. So when we get, and the other thing is you don't have to go through that soup to nuts. You just take it. Okay, how far does that person need to go? And then I always should be getting a commitment on the next step, what makes sense. And it might be another meeting, it might be another appointment, it might be whatever it is in the customer journey that makes sense. Now, once again, I put pressure on that process. I don't put pressure. So I will be appropriately assertive to the process. Some
Hmm.
people want to jump to the demonstration step really quick, and I'll say, well, you know what? In order to make sure we don't waste your time, there are a few more questions that I need to ask you. So I
Yeah.
may need to move somebody back to that. And it's not because I'm trying to control it. I'm trying to make sure that the process works for them in a way that's going to create the most value for them.
Hmm.
So that's it. That's that process. Now, people will say, well, that's it sort of makes common sense. Well, it does.
Yeah.
But common sense is not always common practice in sales.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and especially if like you mentioned earlier, if you've got an organization that is so numbers focused,
Yep.
it's like, oh, we've got to get to that close. So everybody's, skipping over those initial stages. Let's go to the demonstration, boom, let's go to the negotiation and get to that close as quickly as we can so that we can get our number and go on to the next one, right? Um,
You've heard this before, Scott, I'm sure. Show up and throw up. That
yeah.
was the, show up. Hi, how are you? Let me tell you what we got. And, and then you find out you're making a presentation to a non-decision maker or to somebody who has no interest. But you know what? Somebody who likes you. So, hey, I
Mhm.
had a great call, but they got no authority.
Yeah. And, just kind of thinking about this, we're talking, here a lot of, in this conversation, basically where you're actually having conversations, sales conversations, one-on-one. It may be a Zoom meeting, it may be a phone call, maybe in person. But if you take this and you look at, what all of us are getting bombarded with on like LinkedIn or Facebook messages, those DMs that we get, people are jumping, or even the cold emails that we get
Mhm.
flooded with in our inboxes, they're skipping over and they're just hitting like, let me demonstrate what I've got for you. Or, a lot of times they're just going straight for the close, right?
Yeah,
Instead of, going through that 8 ink process and really, building that rapport, doing the interview, checking to see if there's interest, if there's a need, those types of things. So I think,
absolutely.
like this whole sales process isn't just for when you're having a conversation with a person. It could even be in some of that cold outreach that a lot of businesses do as well, right?
Absolutely. And that's your area of expertise is making sure those things happen. And I think you and I both heard, folks say that, great marketing is about engaging in the conversation going on in the mind of the person. So that
Yeah.
tends to be about their world, what's going
Yeah.
on for them in their world. But I think great salespeople take that conversation, take that internal dialogue and bring it out in conversation through both the art and science of asking great questions. And it
Hmm.
really comes down to dialogue.
Yeah.
And one last thing here, and I used to represent the folks that are at Vital Smarts. If folks haven't read the book Crucial Conversations, great book. They used to have a program called Path of Dialogue, which I used to represent as well. And at the heart of all effective dialogue is what they call mutual intent or shared purpose. It's really where people get the message, I want what you want. Well, that's what the 8 Inc framework does.
Hmm.
In the interview step, I can't understand what you want unless I ask questions
Yeah.
and I come into alignment around that, and I get very clear about what you want and what you want, and then I simply assist in helping sure that that gets facilitated. What's interesting is what maintains that dialogue is safety. Is safety. So when I think about the art of how I ask questions in a way that keeps the conversation safe for people. So I
Mm.
don't ask questions where it's implied there's a right answer. I will ask questions in a way like, what are some of the things that are major concerns for you this year? Instead of being what is the single most important thing you want to accomplish this year? What is this, a quiz? I mean, all I want to do is, and then you help people hone into what's really important to them.
Hmm.
So there's an art to it. How do you ask the follow-up questions in a way that are conversational? There's an art to it. Words matter in that. So how
Yeah.
do we frame that? So here's the thing I've learned is I've been doing this with Ron Willingham's materials since 1991. But every time I go through a program, there's something I learn from the group I facilitate as well.
Hmm.
Because there's while it's simple, it's complex in its simplicity. And you
Yeah.
continue to learn, continue to
Yeah.
learn.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, I really appreciate your time today. This has been really insightful. Just that high level overview of both, the mindset and the skill set. And, as we mentioned, earlier, like we're talking about the human to human aspect of it. but we do have to focus on, when we conquer that mindset piece, which is so critical, basically about 80% of everything,
Yes,
and then the tactics are the 20%, those skills. Once we can master all of that together, now we can really have human to human interaction that's going to get us where we want to be with our business, help us have that ROI and have good sales conversations and feel comfortable in doing it.
absolutely. And you know what? I don't think AI is there.
No, no, AI definitely is not there yet.
Yeah. So the human to human component, as people truly understand that and develop their own expertise, their own authenticity in that sense, and we couple it with what you just said about skill set and mindset, then if, professional salespeople that approach it this way will always, my sense is they'll always have a place.
Yeah.
Always have a place. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Steve, I appreciate your time today. I know you mentioned, the book Integrity Selling. I encourage everybody to go pick up a copy of that because that is a great resource to dive into. And then, Steve, I'm assuming that if people want to reach out to you, we can put your email in the show notes, and they can email you directly if they want to get a one-on-one call or have you come in and do a training for their team or something like that. They could strike up that conversation, and you'd be willing to have that with them.
Absolutely. Just, and just have an initial conversation about, what are some of the challenges. And my goal would be is that, even if it doesn't mean we work together, that at the end of the conversation, you've got some value that will empower you to be more effective in your role with your people. Because like that call reluctance profile,
Hmm.
you're talking about a lot of the folks that follow you are solopreneurs, or maybe they're making their first hire for a salesperson.
Hmm.
Wouldn't it be helpful to know up front how motivated they are, how goal focused they are, and if they've got any mindset baggage that'll get in the way?
Yeah.
That would be very helpful
That'd
to
be
know up
helpful.
front.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Powerful.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, we'll make sure that Steve's email is in the show notes. That way, if you want to reach out to him, he's a great guy to give you some resources to help you with the sales aspect of for yourself and for your team. And if you're looking to supercharge your email marketing, check out my book, Hit the Inbox, at hittheinboxbook.com. It's packed with 76 pages of strategies to get your emails landing in inboxes and driving sales. Thanks for tuning in today. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. It helps us reach more entrepreneurs like you. And until next time, keep crushing it in the trenches.